Yo, what's good, YouTube, and welcome everybody to episode number 57 of the CG Sports Podcast. And today we are back with another episode. We got some NFL news, we've got some NBA news, we got some picks for tonight, and of course we have your sports better lock of the night. So this is going to be a bit of a shorter episode because we don't have a lot of game picks tonight, but nonetheless, let's get straight into this one, starting off with our NFL news. Now keep in mind, this is starting from last Tuesday, so we've had a lot of news come out. A lot of it I did honestly get rid of because it was kind of like injury reports for games that have already happened. So those I didn't really feel like you guys need to hear, but nonetheless, let's get into it. Starting off with the biggest news we had of the week. Cam Newton re-signed with the Carolina Panthers, and he did play on Sunday. Actually came out with 2 touchdowns. I believe he only had maybe a day, if not 2 days, to practice with this Panthers team, and they still found a way to fit him into this offense, and he actually found a way to be productive, which is a phenomenal feat. Whether he will be the starting quarterback until Sam Darnold comes back, I would say yes. But with the limited role we saw from him, he definitely looked good. He's definitely still got the running ability, and I'm excited to see what he could do with a full week of practice in this Panthers offense. So moving on to our next news, Cardinals running back Chase Edmonds is on IR with a high ankle sprain. Now, if you guys don't know what happens is when a guy gets on injury reserve, they have to miss at least the next 3 weeks before they could be activated off of the IR. So Edmonds missing at least the next 3 weeks, which means James Conner fantasy owners, you got to push this guy through the roof. We watched him on Sunday against Carolina, and he actually did come out with a rushing touchdown. Yes, they lost, but that touchdown was enough for you to break your projected points for James Conner. So definitely be pushing that guy up there if he's on your fantasy team. Moving on to our next one, Steelers QB Ben Roethlisberger missed Sunday's game with COVID, and they did end up tying with the Lions, but Ben looks to be good. He is recovering well, and he is expected to play next Sunday. So that is obviously good news. It was you'd like to think that with him they would have beat Detroit, but obviously a tough missed opportunity right there, and they'll obviously have to bounce back. So, but good to hear that Big Ben is recovering well from that COVID reserve. Moving on to some more big news. Odell Beckham Jr., who we said in the last episode, he quoted himself that he was going to take his time choosing what team he wanted to sign with. He did not do that. He signed, I think, maybe 3 days after that, signs with the LA Rams, and he actually played on Monday night against the 49ers. And yes, they lost. It was a pretty embarrassing loss, to say the least, but he is on the Rams. He has played. He didn't show us too much in that opening game, but obviously it's going to take some time for him to get used to the system and, you know, get to where he wants to be. So nonetheless, big addition for them, and they're going to need it because as we go to our next story, Rams receiver Robert Woods out for the season with a torn ACL. Now, this is a big loss for the Rams. We know he was their guy, their wide receiver 1 coming into the year. Obviously, Cooper Kupp has kind of taken that role now, but coming into the season, he was the number 1 receiver on this team. So for them losing him, hopefully OBJ will be able to pick up some of the slack that they'll be losing without him, and obviously they'll still have Van Jefferson, and obviously Tyler Higbee's still nice as well, even though he's not a receiver. But nonetheless, obviously while this sucks, I think OBJ will fill a lot of the gap that they need filled by this Robert Woods injury. So they signed OBJ at the right time. They definitely signed him at the right time. Moving on to our next story. This is more recent news here. Bucs defensive tackle Vita Vea has been diagnosed with a bone bruise after a MCL sprain suffered in Sunday's game against the Washington football team, which they somehow lost. We'll get into that on tomorrow's episode. But Vita Vea will be missing some time. I assume by this they mean maybe 2 to 5 weeks. We don't really know too much just yet, but I would assume somewhere in that time range. Moving on to our next story. Pittsburgh Steelers cornerback Joe Hayden is currently day-to-day with a foot injury that he suffered in Sunday's game against Detroit. Now, we don't really know, similar with Vita Vea. Obviously, they say day-to-day, but day-to-day could last the rest of the week into Sunday. But I don't think it will. I think Joe Hayden will be good to go for Week 11. No problem there. Moving on over to Green Bay, Aaron Jones suffered a mild MCL sprain, and he is expected to miss 2 weeks. Green Bay, obviously matching up with the Seahawks, somehow managed to come up with a win against that team. Obviously, it was a very low-scoring, very disappointing game, but Green Bay did come out on top. So, similar to the Chase Edmonds situation, if you have A.J. Dillon on your fantasy team, you got to bump that guy up because not only does he have the receiving upside, he is now going to be the number 1 running back in Green Bay. So that's definitely something to look forward to over there. And moving on to Miami, Tua Tagovailoa is expected to start Sunday as per head coach Brian Flores. Now, we already spoke about what happened on his matchup on Thursday night, where he just kind of showed up halfway through the third quarter. The game was still close. Brissett wasn't hurt. He wasn't playing bad. But Tua, obviously, as we said, he did his thing. And now he's going to get the start on Sunday. So we'll see how that goes. And we'll see if he could keep up the good momentum from that finish on Thursday night. And for our final story over on the NFL side, Washington football team defensive end Chase Young is out for the season with a torn ACL, obviously suffered against the against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And this is a big loss for them because we know how good that front seven is, and Young has been the leader of that. Obviously, he's slowed down a lot this year, but he's still a major part. He's still been putting on a lot of pressure. He's still made some good tackles in the run game. So Washington's going to have some problems losing that guy. We'll move on to our NBA news. Now, starting off, we spoke a lot last week about the Jaylen Brown for Ben Simmons trade situation. We made it clear that the Celtics were not interested in doing a trade like that, but the Sixers continue to persist and try to make a deal. And the Sixers have said that they have continued to try and make offers, but now Celtics GM Brad Stevens has said that they have officially given up trade talks after Sixers president Daryl Morey requested this trade. Jaylen Brown, Marcus Smart, Robert Williams, and a future first for Ben Simmons and Danny Green. As a Sixers fan, this is absolutely ridiculous, and I have no problem with the Celtics hanging up the phone on this one. That is unbelievably one-sided. There's no way you're expecting to get 3 solid role players and a future first. Well, not even 3 solid, 2 solid role players and a star in the league for Ben Simmons and Danny Green. I'm sorry, it's not going to happen, so I agree with the Celtics for giving up this trade with Philadelphia. And sticking with Philadelphia, we've got some more news on Ben Simmons. Ben Simmons has stated that he believes the Sixers' tactics of finding him for not only missing games but also missing therapy sessions is actually worsening his mental health. And this is just him getting right back at Philly and getting the momentum back on his side to continue to not play. Ben has also said that he believes the Sixers want to deem him fit to force him to play, and that is the only reason they are sending a therapist is because they want him on the court, not because they don't care about his mental health. Simmons' agent, Rich Paul, agrees with Simmons and adds that he doesn't care about a trade in the slightest and just wants Ben to gain his mental strength. And listen, you gotta appreciate an agent that could obviously stick with his player, but at some point you gotta be real and know that this guy just doesn't want to play with the team. To say you don't care about a trade is absolutely ridiculous because you know that in a heartbeat you want to get Ben out of there because he's clearly not a fit in Philadelphia. So I think that's absolutely ridiculous. And some newer information on Ben is that he has been fined for failing to travel with the 76ers on their 6-game road trip. So another fine going at Ben Simmons. Obviously, he's still going to be missing those game checks for all 6 of those games that he misses. I don't know when this guy is just going to accept that he's got to play. We'll have to wait and see if he ever does. But for now, he's really getting pushed into a corner by the Sixers organization. So we'll see what he does there. I'm sure in the next week we will hear, I'm hoping, some more news and maybe a decision made by Simmons or by his agent. Moving on over to Chicago, Bulls point guard Alex Caruso, who signed this offseason, says that the Lakers lowballed him by offering 2 years, $15 million. I'm not sure how exactly that's a lowball, but I do agree that Caruso deserves more. As a normal middle-class person, $15 million for 2 years sounds unbelievable. In NBA terms, I could see where Caruso's coming from, and his value is clearly being shown as he continues to be efficient for Chicago, and the Lakers continue to miss his presence with that lack of bench scoring, and we could even get into how the starters are struggling to score, but we'll get into that a little bit later. But I do agree with Caruso, and I think he made the right move, getting the best offer, joining a contending team in the Chicago Bulls, and he's been a big role player for them so far. Moving on over to Golden State, Klay Thompson is, quote-unquote, according to the Warriors, making steady progress and is 5 to 6 weeks away from making his return. That sounds like it'll be around Christmas, maybe a little earlier, maybe a little later, depending on where that 5 to 6 weeks number lies. But, man, I'm not going to lie. When we first started talking about Klay Thompson, I thought we were talking about he was going to be back for the playoffs. But really, really soon here, as he'll be back in December, getting back way before the All-Star break. And that is huge for Golden State to get this guy back, not only for his defensive presence, but of course for that three-point shooting. So we'll keep, we'll keep a track on Klay and see if his recovery time and expectance to return either, comes closer or goes farther away. Now, it is time we talk about the Los Angeles Lakers. I said we were going to get into it. Now, we are going to get into it. Anthony Davis has officially stated that the Lakers are not playing like a championship team and that they are not a championship team. And I got to say this. I put out a TikTok a couple weeks ago where there was some clip of LeBron James, and he went up, and I believe he got blocked or he got a no foul call, and he literally refused to go back on defense. Just sat there on the other side of the court, let the whole other team run down the floor, and did nothing. And I said this was going to be the beginning of some major problems for the Los Angeles Lakers, and that it was. We saw Dwight and AD fighting on the bench. We've seen a bunch of problems with Russell Westbrook's play. And now AD is saying that this team is not a championship team. And I think this is a direct call out to Russell Westbrook, saying that you are not doing enough. His key words were the Lakers are not playing like a championship team. AD's been playing fine. This is a clear call out to Russell Westbrook, and I've been saying it for so long that Westbrook does not fit into this Lakers system, and he continues to prove that right. So some big problems going on there in LA, and they're going to have to figure something out, whether they're trading Westbrook for a guy who could play off the ball, a guy who could space the floor, whatever they need to do. You got to get Russell Westbrook out of there. I think it's time for the Lakers to hit the panic button, because when the best player on the court, for you, obviously, when LeBron comes back, he will be. But when the best player on the court right now has absolutely no faith in this team being a championship team, what is he even playing for at that point? Is he just playing for stats, positioning, just to not go to the chip? I don't know what this guy's playing for if he's not playing for a championship, because he clearly doesn't believe in them. So the Lakers got a lot to figure out, and we'll see what they go ahead and do with that. But we're going to move on to tonight's NBA picks. Today is November 16th for anyone who is watching this at a later point. We've only got 3 games, but we're going to go ahead and cover all of them, starting off with my team, the Philadelphia 76ers, who will be starting off their road trip against the Utah Jazz. Now, keep in mind the Sixers will have no Joel Embiid once again, no Danny Green, and no Matisse Thybulle. I think even with those guys, we still lose this one, because the Jazz have been consistently one of the best teams in the league, and especially one of the best teams in the Western Conference. So I think Donovan Mitchell and company are able to get it done. I think the supporting cast will have a big day for them. Sixers keep it close for the most part, but let this one go in the end. And the Jazz win this one 112-98 is going to be my call. Moving on to our next game, another big game. The Brooklyn Nets and the Golden State Warriors. Now, the Nets are another team that are going to have a lot of missing guys in this one today. No Paul Millsap, no Nicholas Claxton, and no Joe Harris for them. So I think the Warriors will really put up a good fight. We all know that the Warriors are a true contender. Yes, I'm saying that, a true contender in the league. And I would love to tell you they're going to win, but I can't bet against the Brooklyn Nets, man. KD has been out of his mind. Harden is slowly starting to get things together. I think that they could put 2 and 2 together. LaMarcus Aldridge has been very, very solid. I think they could get this one done. It'll be a close game, come down to the finish, but the Nets win this one, barely getting past the Warriors, 107-101. And moving on to our final game of the night is going to be the Los Angeles Clippers and the San Antonio Spurs. Now, of course, we know the Spurs all this season have very much missed the presence of DeMar DeRozan, who was there the year before. Still got DeJounte Murray. Outside of that, I don't really know anybody that we could really give big credit to. But nonetheless, Paul George. That's all I got to say about this one. Paul George has been playing out of his mind. He's been phenomenal. The supporting cast has been iffy, but I think Paul George in itself, just playing in this game, will be enough for the Clippers to take down the Spurs. So final score for this one is going to be 102-95 in favor of the Los Angeles Clippers. They come up with a big win and continue to make their way up towards the top of the Western Conference. And moving on to our final segment of the day, we're going to have our Sports Better Lock of the Night. And this one is going to come from the Nets and Warriors game. I'm going to be locking in the under of 222. So I think there will be less than 222 total points scored. I think usually when we get a lot of games like this where we get 2 very high-powered offensive teams, we kind of overhype how much these guys are going to score. And usually that over does not hit. So I'm going to stick with the trend. I'm going to take the under for this Nets Warriors game. That is going to be your Sports Better Lock of the Night. And that is going to do it for episode number 57. Appreciate everybody that came through to the end. Make sure you guys like, comment, and subscribe. Make sure you guys show some love. Let me know in the comments if there's any specific topics that you guys want me to talk about. We will have an episode coming out tomorrow with our Week 11 game picks. I should be having a guest coming on as well, so we'll do some special segments talking to them. But nonetheless, I'm going to let you guys get on up out of here. It's been your boy CG, and I'm out. Peace.